Hello again, and welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to be looking at the endocrine system. This is going to be an introduction to the system, and it's the first part. We're going to be looking at the following sections: what the endocrine system is and what its functions are. We're also going to talk about what hormones are, what glands are, give some examples of glands of the body and what hormones they secrete. We're going to talk about the functions of those hormones. And then finally, we'll talk about how hormones are transported around the body and how they bring about their effects. So let's dig into it. So on the first page, you've got a table which we will be completing together. But before we go into that, let's just talk a little bit about what the endocrine system is. So the endocrine system is a system of organs called glands which produce and secrete hormones. So what are hormones? Hormones are chemical messengers. What do I mean by chemical messengers? Basically, they are chemicals that are sent around the body in the blood, which bring about certain responses in target organs. What are target organs? They are organs which have complementary receptors to the shape of the hormones. And as such, the hormones will only affect organs and tissues with the right receptors and nothing else. So that's how hormones work. We're going to talk now about some examples of hormones and some of the glands that produce them. I'll give you, let's go for 20 seconds. You can pause this video and see if you can name those organs and the glands and the hormones that they produce. Pause now. Okay, so let's see if you got those right. So the very first one, which should hopefully be relatively easy to identify, would be the testes, which are sometimes also called the testicles. And the hormone, or the main hormone that they produce, is testosterone. So they produce testosterone. So let's think about what the effects of testosterone are. Testosterone is involved with bringing about or stimulating the male secondary sexual characteristics in humans. So male secondary sexual characteristics. What do I mean? Why secondary? Well, the primary sexual characteristic is having a penis and testicles in the first place. However, the secondary characteristics only arise when you are preparing to actually reproduce, and they happen at puberty. So these happen at puberty. So let's do some examples of those. I'll give you, yet again, about 20 seconds to think about some of those characteristics that arise at puberty in boys. Pause now. Right, let's see how many of those you got right. So hair growth in new places. And some people think that that is so as to hold on to things called pheromones, which make you more attractive to people of the opposite sex. So that's hair growth in new places. It also causes a growth spurt. So in males, in our evolutionary past, it would have meant that you grew stronger so that you would be able to get more mates by being able to hunt more effectively and protect your shelter and your food and your mates and your children and so on. So that's growth spurt. The next or another example would be the voice deepening. Also to project manliness and to put off any competitors, any other males who were trying to get hold of your food mates and so on. Okay, and muscle development. Actually, let's just assume that muscle development is part of the growth spurt because we're running out of space. Let's put in sperm production instead, which is probably the key function. So it stimulates the testicles to start making sperm. And the sperm cells are the male gametes. Without them, the males can't reproduce. Okay, so let's go on to the next example. Let's see if you can identify that one, or if you identified it correctly. And it's the ovaries. Okay, and they produce estrogen and progesterone. And they are responsible for the female secondary sexual characteristics. And yet again, the primary sexual characteristic is having the female sexual organs. So having ovaries in the first place and a vagina and so on. So these secondary sexual characteristics happen at puberty as well, usually a bit earlier than males. And we've got some examples. Some of them are very similar to the ones that occur in males. So another one is hair growth in new places, a growth spurt. All of these are pretty much for similar reasons to males. So with the growth spurt, it means that the woman is more likely to actually be able to successfully reproduce. And what happens is that as she grows, the opening of her pelvis becomes bigger and wider to accommodate a baby's head as it's being pushed out. So that's a growth spurt. And then one of the key ones is the release of ova. And so the ova or eggs, unlike in males, were all made prior to the female's birth, while she was herself growing in her mother's womb. As such, all of the eggs or ova already exist within the ovaries at puberty. And at puberty, they are simply released and matured, ready to be fertilized. And then finally, they nurture the fetus. So feed and nurture the fetus. So that's those are the roles of the ovaries, to stimulate all of that, bring them about so that the female is more likely to be able to successfully reproduce. Let's go on to the next one. So a bit more of a challenging one this time. Let's see if you were able to figure that one out correctly. And it is the pancreas. So that's the third one down, and it's the pancreas. And it is responsible for the hormones insulin and glucagon. What do those hormones do? So these hormones control blood glucose levels. So after you've eaten a starch-rich meal or drinking sugary drink or some chocolate or bread or something along those lines, you end up with more glucose being absorbed into the body. Your body has to be able to regulate how much glucose is in the blood. Too little and your organs and tissues won't have enough fuel for respiration. Too much and it affects your water potential or the water potential of your blood, and it means that your tissues, your cells, lose too much water to the blood. That has two bad effects. Number one, it could damage the cells, but number two, it could lead to quite high blood pressure, which could then damage organs. So control of blood glucose levels is a vital function. So how does this work? Insulin stimulates the removal of glucose from blood. How does it do that? It converts glucose into something called glycogen. It also stimulates cells to take up more glucose out of the surrounding tissue or blood or whatever, all of which has the effect of reducing the amount of glucose within the blood. Say, for instance, just after a meal. The next hormone that's released by the pancreas is glucagon. And glucagon stimulates an increase in blood glucose levels. And that would be necessary, say, for instance, if you need more glucose for more muscle activity. So the glucagon, what it does is it reduces the uptake of glucose from the blood and tissue fluid by cells. It also stimulates the conversion of glycogen and other substances back into glucose, what we call gluconeogenesis. Sounds like a complicated name, but all it means is glucose, neo, new, and genesis, to begin, as in the first book of the Bible. So gluconeogenesis is basically making new glucose. And then the final one I'm going to do with you is the adrenal glands. And as you can see in the picture, the adrenal glands are found just above each of your kidneys. And they are involved with the production and secretion of adrenaline, which is also known in the United States and some other places as epinephrine. And that is involved with what we call the flight or fight response. So flight or fight response. So what's that? Basically, when we are confronted with a dangerous situation, we have two choices. We either have to fight off what the danger is, basically confront it, or we run away. In both instances, we need the same response. We need our muscles to be primed to be able to either fight or run away. We need that, or we stimulate that in various ways. We increase blood flow to the muscles that we need. We decrease blood flow to the organs and tissues we don't need. So in the instant you're trying to run away, you don't really need your stomach. And so as such, blood flow is diverted away from the stomach in that instance. That's only one example of the fight or flight response. There are lots of other examples. So for instance, heightened awareness is another. So you end up with slightly improved peripheral vision so that you can notice things in the periphery of your eyesight. You don't really want to be running in the direction of the danger, for instance, a predatory animal. So those are some of the examples. So let's write some of that down. So increased blood flow to the muscles and decreased blood flow to the stomach and other non-essential organs at that moment. So increased blood flow, an increased heart rate, etc. All of which primes you to either fight off the dangerous situation or run away from it. I remember when I was younger, my mother often saying to me, you don't have to be the fastest, you just have to be faster than the slowest person. And as such, over multiple generations of that, we were selected so that those that had a heightened flight or fight response were more likely to survive, and those that didn't got eaten. And so their genes were wiped out. So I've left the last one blank because I would like you to see if you can think of another gland and the hormone it produces or secretes, and also think about what the job is of that hormone. I'll give you some clues later on which might help you. Okay, so how are hormones transported around the body? They are transported in the blood. However, if you think about it, the blood goes everywhere. So how does your body determine which parts will respond to the hormone? Easy. What happens is that the target or specific target organs and tissues for any particular hormone must have receptors which are complementary to that hormone. Once the hormone binds to those receptors, it stimulates a response in those target organs and in nothing else. So the blood flows through all the other organs, but if those organs don't have the right receptors, there's no response. So quite an ingenious method there. So let's write that down. They only affect tissues and organs with the right receptors. So you need the right receptors in order to bring about the response. So back to what I promised, which is a clue as to some of the other organs and tissues which act as glands. And so you can have a look through all of those in your own time and come up with one to go in that table. And then the last bit that we're going to discuss is the difference between the two main types of gland. So I've already written that down there. And there are two main glands. They're the endocrine glands, which are the ones that we are concerned with in this worksheet. And endocrine glands all have something in common. They are ductless. That means they don't have tiny tubes through which they secrete their hormones. Instead, the hormones are secreted directly into the blood and then flow to wherever it is that they need to flow through. So ductless glands produce hormones, whereas ducted glands, glands with ducts, tend to produce enzymes. Interestingly enough, there are some glands that do both. One example is the pancreas. So the pancreas has a ductless or hormonal function, which we've already discussed. It secretes insulin and glucagon from parts of the pancreas. If we look up here, you can see little red dots in the pancreas. Those are called the islets of Langerhans. And the islets of Langerhans are what are responsible for making insulin and glucagon and then secreting it into the blood. Now, those are the endocrine functions. The exocrine functions, which are to do with the ducted function of the pancreas, are to do with the digestive enzymes made by the pancreas, all of which form a mixture called pancreatic juice. It isn't really tasty juice though. It's just juice that contains a whole range of different enzymes which help to complete digestion in the small intestine. So what happens is the pancreas releases those enzymes through the ducts into the small intestine through something called the ampulla of Vater. So lots of nice sounding names there. So that's the exocrine glands. So those two are different. We don't really care about the exocrine glands for this lesson, but it's good to know these things in case you come across them. Okay? So that is our introduction to the endocrine system. So let's summarize what we've done today. So we started off with what the endocrine system is, what its job is, and the endocrine system is responsible for making and secreting hormones, special chemical messengers. We talked about what we mean by chemical messengers. So hormones carry instructions around the body, and they bring about their responses in tissues and organs with the right receptors to actually respond to those hormones. The receptors are complementary in shape to the hormones. They're not the same shape, they are complementary in shape to a hormone. So if you think about something like a baseball and a baseball mitt, the ball should fit nicely in the mitt, and that's an example. Okay, so next we talked about the endocrine glands being ductless. That means that they release blood directly into, or release hormones directly into the blood. Unlike the exocrine glands, which use tiny tubes called ducts to release enzymes. And we used an example of an organ that does both, the pancreas. So the pancreas releases insulin and glucagon on its hormonal side, the ductless side, directly into the blood to control blood glucose levels. But it also produces and secretes enzymes in the form of a mixture called pancreatic juice into the small intestine. And then we went on to talk about how hormones are transported around the body. They're transported in the blood and go everywhere. But as I said, they will only bring about their responses in specific tissues and organs with receptors for that particular hormone and nowhere else. And actually, obviously, hormones can have multiple target organs and tissues. Many of them do. So, for instance, the male and female secondary sexual characteristic hormones bring about their effects across a wide range of organs and tissues. Okay, so that's our introduction to the endocrine system. I hope you found that useful. If you did, click the like button below. And if you haven't already done so, click on the subscribe button so that you get notified when I put on the next video. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.